I now request Mr. Chris Musso to deliver his keynote address on growing bigger and getting stronger. Where is the global chemicals headed? Mr. Chris Musso is a senior partner in McKinsey's Denver office. He has been with McKinsey for over 15 years and focuses his client work on growth strategy and M&A in industrial companies. He has led teams across various facets of deals at McKinsey. I now request Mr. Chris Musso to deliver his keynote address.
Good morning. It's a very great honor for me to be here today, for many reasons. First of all, I get to share the stage with some of my heroes, with Mr. Farwell, who I met, I doubt you remember, but I met you about 15 years ago, and have admired him ever since, to see Mr. Maswani, and also to be with Secretary Baroka. Thank you. But the bigger reason is because I get to be here in India with the chemicals industry. I've gotten to spend a lot of time across the world with leaders of the chemicals industry, and I can tell you that nowhere else in the world is there more entrepreneurship than India. And that, I congratulate you on the entrepreneurship that we've seen, and I congratulate you on all the progress that you've made in chemicals. They asked me to speak about what we're seeing at McKinsey in the chemical space. And there are four big things that we want to talk to you about, right? So the first is the frequent supply chains that are causing massive volatility in our industry. I think you've heard about it from my colleagues who've spoken, but I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. The second is the difficulty in organic growth. Now, this may not be as applicable to India because you've got so much growth available still, but it's really difficult in Europe, it's really difficult in North America, and they're very worried about it, and they're very worried about you, and I think they should be, right? Because you're coming after them and you have a great opportunity to do that. The third is digital, and digital in all its glory, and I'll talk about it, but in manufacturing, in supply chain, in sales and marketing, digital is making a big difference, and the best players are going to be able to bring more and more digital to their customers. And then the last one's around sustainability, and I'll talk about this quite a bit. But sustainability, we've talked a lot about decarbonization, but if you think about the markets that the two speakers before me have spoken about, whether it be agriculture, whether it be water, whether it be electronics, all of those are being driven by sustainability, and they cannot achieve there's no way they can achieve their goals without the chemicals industry. In fact, there's no way that we as humanity can achieve our decarbonization goals without real progress in the chemicals industry, and that means there's a huge opportunity. And I think you as entrepreneurs will be able to recognize that and jump on it. So let's jump in and talk. So there's been a lot of talk lately about shocks to energy. There's been a lot of talk lately about shocks to demand, but those aren't the real story. The real story is shocks on the supply side, shocks in the supply chain. And what they're creating is unprecedented volatility. Look at this chart. We just went back from 2000 forward, and we said, where have there been supply shocks in the chemicals industry? And look at, I mean, that chart is just growing and growing. Now, some of that is because of COVID, obviously, but a lot of it is due to the climate changes that Mr. Farwell talked about. A lot of it's due to geopolitical tensions that are happening. A lot of it's due to a focus on cost that have made it so that people are single sourced, and it's created a lot of volatility. So look at this chart. You see in the Great Recession we saw significant volatility, but during COVID, in the pandemic, you saw more increase and more drop than we've ever seen. We think this is going to continue, and we think that you've got to be thinking very hard as a chemical industry about how to manage this volatility in your business. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but volatility and supply-driven volatility is really important. I've spent quite a bit of time working with some European chemical companies, helping them to figure out what their strategy will be given the energy situation. And as we've dug into that, we're realizing that the energy situation is important, clearly important, but that the fact that there's been a decoupled supply chain with Asia because there haven't been enough ships, there haven't been enough transport, that's actually been a bigger effect for most of them. Not for all of them, but for most of them. And you think about what that means with a decoupled supply situation. That means Europe prices have gone way up, but it also means that there's a real threat for India and China to come in and take their markets. And so think about that as we go forward. All right, the next one. So overall market growth is slowing down for the chemicals industry. There's a few trends that we talk about a lot, like polyethylene. I think the best trend in the whole world is that polyethylene will continue to outgrow GDP by, 0.5%, somewhere between 0.5% and 2%, because as people get more wealthy, they don't want to get poisoned by their food anymore, right? So polyethylene will continue to grow, but there are other chemicals that aren't. And if you look at this, China was driving most of the growth in the 2000s, started to slow down a little bit in the 2010s, but as we look at it going forward, with Europe slowing way down, with North America being about level, with China slowing way down, that means that chemicals broadly are going to be roughly GDP. And that is not the case here in India, as we just saw. You can outgrow it in India, and that's a great opportunity for you, and a great opportunity for you to play. But if you just stay in the old markets, and you don't do, if you just stay and play in the old markets, then you probably can expect to be around GDP. And most of the stock markets won't reward that. And so what do you do in that situation? You can see the profit pools on the left-hand side, ethylene taking a big hit, some of the more primaries taking a big hit as well. But there's some big opportunities that have come out, right? So the first one is sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, we're not just talking about decarbonization of the chemicals industry. We think that that's important, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But we're talking about the sustainability across the value chain, so mostly downstream from you. If you go into end markets that have sustainability-driven tailwinds, so think wind turbines, solar, electric vehicles, biologics, agriculture, things that are driving both decarbonization and also quality of life, those are going to be growing, they're going to be outgrowing just about every other end market, and every one of them needs your help. They've all got problems that they can't solve without better materials, and it's a huge opportunity for you. And so that leads into those winning platforms that we're showing there: crop solutions, health and nutrition, personal care, and some of the more advanced materials that will be going into the electronics and electronic products, which then leads into the last one, which is around M&A, because people who don't make progress in the first two are going to be the ones that get bought, and people who do make progress in the first two are going to be the buyers. And we think that there's real M&A opportunity driven by that. The third one that we're seeing, the third trend, is around digital. I loved hearing about Syngenta Kit. I love hearing about the different, 3D TRASAR has always been one of my favorite opportunities and one of my favorite stories of someone who takes digital and says, how do I tie digital and how do I turn a business model on its end and make a chemical closer to a service and make it more valuable through digital? But that's not the only piece of digital, right? One of the pieces that we're seeing, especially in commodity chemicals, is end-to-end lean, where you're using digital to really be able to identify everything that's going on in your plant and using AI to really be able to optimize those things. It's pretty cool when it works. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a culture change in the company for it to work, but it's a powerful, powerful tool. And the end-to-end piece goes beyond then operations, because if you're going to drive it through the culture, you've got to be able to put it into your sales and marketing too. And it can look, it can go all the way from an app that your salespeople can use so that they understand exactly what the prices are for their customers when they walk in, to 3D TRASAR or to Syngenta Kit, right? Major business model changes that they do as they go. But no matter what, if you're going to go in digital, it's going to be a bold bet. And it's a culture change and requires leadership of the kind of leadership, frankly, that I've only seen here in India, right? It's a very entrepreneurial move, but it's something that the great companies will figure out as they go. So when we look at where the value is in there, if you look at this, it's kind of a complicated circle. But if you look at where the value is, it's usually in marketing and sales and production. But we're seeing somewhere between 5 and 10 percentage points of EBITDA available through good use of digital, right? The procurement and supply chain pieces are also powerful, but if you just focus on marketing and sales and production, there's great dollars to be had in digital. We included this page just to kind of show you that digital is such a broad spectrum. And so within commodity, you see the yield, throughput, robotics, automating the back office, and things that India is frankly very good at doing from an automation standpoint. Within specialty, that's where you're really getting into the pricing and into the sales and marketing and using those, right? And we think that the best way to get going is to start on those areas where you can create quick wins and real value, and then use that to drive the culture change, because it gets people going behind you on it. All right, so let me talk about sustainability, and I may spend a little more time on this one than I have on the other stuff, but sustainability is becoming clearly a prerequisite to operate. And so what we mean by that is, as the previous speakers have pointed out, just about every chemical company has something out there around when they're going to hit net zero. The timing ranges for the Western companies somewhere between 2030 and 2050, and for other companies between 2050 and 2070. But it's the decarbonization move in operations, in our view, is largely defensive. So what I mean by that is, as regulations change, as customer preferences change, you're going to see that decarbonization becomes more and more important. But the other half of it is it's like what we love to do. I mean, you guys, I think a lot of you here are chemical engineers, and you say, hey, if you give me a really hard engineering problem, I'm going to be able to solve it, right? And so decarbonization in our own operations, that's something that I personally believe that the chemicals industry is going to be able to figure out probably better than just about any other industry, right? And if you do it smartly, there'll be significant savings that come up front, because you'll choose the decarbonization things that are focused on energy efficiency. You get more efficient, you save some money there, and then you progress. If you don't do it smartly, you can lose a lot of money on decarbonization because you go after the wrong projects. But that's, like I said, that's defensive. Where you need to be, where I really believe we need to be as an industry, is on the offense. You need to be going after these markets that can't achieve their targets without you, because they'll pay you for it. Let me give you an example. So in an electric vehicle right now, the battery is by far the most expensive part anybody's ever seen in an electric vehicle. It's a $10,000 part. And for reference, an engine might be like a really nice engine like Florian Buda would have in his cars. Might be like a $2,000 part. And so you got this crazy expensive battery, and then the motor, and then you've got a little part called the inverter. And the inverter is the thing that loses a lot of the power in the system. If you can use your materials to make that inverter more efficient, that means they can make that battery less expensive, and they're happy to pay you for these materials. Right? Same thing with wind turbines. There's a variety of applications there, a variety of applications within solar, where you can use materials to drive performance, and you can get paid in ways that you've never been able to imagine in those industries before. And it goes across the markets that we pointed out: biologics, agriculture. I mean, throughout these markets where sustainability is driving major change, there is huge opportunity for the chemicals industry to go pursue. So when we talk about the sustainability opportunities, I talked a little bit about the downstream transition. When we think about circularity, we think there's a lot of opportunities in circularity. Right? I mean, look at these recycling rates. They're pretty deplorable, right? I mean, the best we're getting is in Western Europe, 30%. But you look at North America, I mean, basically everywhere else outside of Asia is down in the low single digits. It's embarrassing, and it's not something that we as an industry should stand for. Now, the challenge is that most of the problem when you go through and analyze it is in collection. And it's getting consumers to change their behavior, and they don't necessarily have a reason to right now. And so regulators will step in and help drive some of that, but even they can't solve all of it. And so there's collaboration that has to happen at a very different scale than it has before. And that means collaboration not only with the government, not only with the chemical companies or other peers, but also bringing in the waste haulers, bringing in municipalities, bringing in schools and educators and even NGOs to try to get them all to move. But that's what's going to be required in order to be able to move circularity and get it going forward. And that's where leadership stands tall. That's where entrepreneurship is going to be really profitable. There are digital tools that can help drive this collaboration. There's different ways to track it. But if you think about it, there's a lot of money to be had there. The next, bio-based chemicals. So my first project at McKinsey when I joined 18 years ago was on PLA, right? And PLA is now the biggest of the little tiny biochemicals, right? It's right there. PBAT and PLA are kind of right beside each other. Bio-based chemicals, they're less than 1% of the total polymer galaxy, but the investments are growing. And we think as people drive better performance in these materials, there continues to be good growth. There's a lot of brand demand for it. The brand owners are willing to pay for it, but there's some real progress that has to happen. And we think that it remains an interesting place to play. Decarbonization, this has already been covered, but here's just a chart which you can look at later that has all the different companies with the commitments that they've made. And finally, I think most of you here have probably seen this curve, but the way to read this curve is this is the abatement cost curve. So if you look at the total CO2 that we can reduce in the world, and you look at the different activities that we can take, the stuff here on the left side, on this side, these are levers that you can take that will have net cost savings to society, and the stuff on the other side are activities that we'll take that will be expensive but are probably necessary. We've highlighted in green there the things that are enabled by chemicals. And what's fascinating about it is almost all the levers that have cost savings are driven by you, are driven by the chemicals industry, and that means when there's cost savings, that means there's money. There's money for you to go get if you can help enable these different spaces. And I think each one of you, depending on the products that you make, will have a different perspective on what you might be able to bring. But go get it. Man, we need it. We need it as society for you to go get it. And we would be happy for you to get as rich as possible off this. And so take it and go for it. And it's a huge message that we're trying to tell everybody that we talk to in chemicals, because you can really make a difference here. And we're very excited about the opportunity that you can do as you drive that. So what's it mean for Indian chemical companies, right? 4 actions. The first one is, given that volatility, you got to think really hard about how you're going to be resilient. And what we mean by resilient is how are you going to react? Because you don't know 3 months or 6 months from now, whether your price is going to be way low or whether your price is going to be way high. So are you able to take advantage of either situation? The second thing is, where are your growth engines? Like, what are you doing to go out and find places to grow? I think you've got a lot of opportunity here internal to India. I think you've got a bigger opportunity in the short term to go to export and to go after some of the new application areas that you can play in. The third is a very dedicated focus on digitization, figuring out where it's going to be valuable to you and then chasing after it. And the fourth is going on the offense on sustainability. So just a couple of points. This is an interesting chart. When we went back and we looked at companies and we looked at resilience and how resilient the companies were to different changes. And you can see that the resilient companies throughout the entire cycle tend to be more profitable. We can talk afterwards about what it means to be resilient. But here's some places you can start, right? So a few levers. One, energy efficiency. When we say spend less for utilities, that's code for as energy efficient as you can be and being able to drive that, right? Really focused on pricing. And when we say really focused on pricing, this means creating contracts that are going to allow you to have margin protection, but also being able to maneuver. If you need to drop price in order to gain volume, having the cost base that allows you to do that. Secure operations, fixed costs, those all make sense. But this is being very, very thoughtful about what you look like, both in a trough and in a peak, and then managing that business so that it can take advantage of both of them. The second, you see the themes very similar to the themes that you've seen from the other speakers here. And the reason they're similar is because they're darn good. Guys, there are opportunities here, and there is money to be made and growth to be had for you in export markets, in internal to Indian markets, but places wherever you can help drive downstream value, and you can help your customers to be able to decarbonize and be able to drive better sustainability for them. If you do that, there's huge opportunity for you. Third, as we talked about in digital, right? Think about it first as a value driver. There's a reason we put that on the left-hand side of the page. Think about where digital can create money for you, can create value for you, and then think about it as a backbone and think about what you're going to have to do culturally to change it. You should talk to Mr. Goyal. He's one of the leaders in the world, one of the best thinkers that I've seen on digital, and can help you think that through if you're interested. And finally, take the offensive on sustainability. Jump on this. As we said, when I hear if you listen to the first two speakers talk, I think you'll realize that so much of what we do is driving quality of life. Like being able to be more efficient in food supply, more secure in food supply, that drives quality of life. Being better with plastics so that we can use them not only in a secure supply chain, but also in medical applications, in electronics applications, that drives quality of life. And that's a narrative that we don't necessarily have control of as an industry right now, right? The NGOs are out talking about how terrible plastics are and how terrible single-use plastics are. And there is some truth in some of the things that they say, but they're not telling everybody about how much more resilient the supply chain is and how many more people are getting food because of that plastics and what plastics is bringing. We need, as an industry, to get control of this narrative and to capture it and help people understand what it means and help people understand that they're never going to achieve sustainability without the chemicals industry, right? And then we got to think about our portfolios, right? As you think about your innovation going forward, if you're focused on the markets that we're talking about, that all three of us have been talking about, there's a great opportunity out there. And as you do that, you're going to help people, your customers, identify and chase their sustainability goals. And you're going to emerge as heroes, rich heroes, but heroes nonetheless. And then, we can't lose sight of recycling. We can't lose sight of decarbonization, but we don't have to do it all tomorrow, right? We should move on to things that are going to be valuable and then continue to develop the technology so that we can get our other problems solved. And finally, we've got to think about how we're going to drive this collaboration. The collaboration around circularity, the collaboration around the narrative, all of that. It's a multi-party collaboration, and someone needs to stand up and lead. And if anybody can do it, it's you. So once again, thank you for the great honor to speak with you. I'm very enthusiastic for the Indian chemical industry and very grateful to be here with you. Thank you.